in the Arcturus system. The Arcturus system, many of the beings you're going to find from there are going to be from the 6th to the 8th dimension. That's where most of the beings are. Now, there's some in the lower dimensions as well, but most are coming in the higher realms. And in that system, they are very proficient at working with the language of light. The language of light is a universal language. It is light, sacred geometry, and the vibration of matter. All right? So it's a full encoding. When you get to the lower dimension here, because of how you're operating, the brain, or the mind, is parsing out the language of light because there's too much data. And the brain says, this doesn't compute. I don't know what to do with this. There's symbols, sacred geometry, don't know what it is, going out the window. So all you hear is pretty singing for most of you. The heart center, if you're allowing yourself to process it through the heart, is going to experience all this. It's going to see the language of light. It's going to see the colors. It's going to see the sacred geometry. And you're going to know the information, the translation. They're proficient at working with the language of light. The Arcturans have integrated a lot of their own duality. They don't have a lot of judgment. They're not really charged. So they go into other systems and they assist beings who are having a difficult time. You could think of them as arbitrators. And they work with the language of light to do so. Now, if you've got two people who are having a challenging time and are on opposing sides, when they come before each other, because they're still operating under the laws of attraction and reflection, one's going to trigger the other. But if you've got a neutral party, it makes it much easier. And that's what the Arcturans do. The Arcturans are also working with you, with your crop circles. Much of the information that you are receiving through your crop circles is being deposited by the Arcturans. They're assisting you. Now, not all crop circles are vibrations that are being projected by the Arcturans. Some of them are also vibrations of the planet herself. As she is giving you codings, she's receiving signals that are being sent from the sun. The sun is the metronome, if you will, for your solar system that keeps everything on track, on pace. And the sun is sending signals to the earth, reminding her it's time to do certain things. And she is bringing up these sacred geometrical patterns, bringing up these images that are encoded. Now, you as a human being don't have to know literally what these encodings mean, but if you sit and process it through your heart center, if you feel it in your heart center, you're going to know. Say, oh, well, this feels like this has to do with what region of space we're moving through, and it's about waking up. It's about treating Earth with respect. I don't know where it comes from, but this is what I feel. All right, so process it through the heart. Now the Lyrans, or Lyrans, however you like to say it, a good portion of the Lyrans are from 5 to 7. All right, from the 5th dimension to the 7th dimension. Now, the Lyrans were amongst some of the earliest inhabitants on planet Earth. Your Lemurian civilization was seeded from Lyrans, who decided they wanted to come to Earth. Now, there have been great wars in the Lyran star system, and Earth was a refuge for many of the Lyrans during these times. And the Lyrans are proficient with sacred geometry and mathematics. They're also proficient healers. So the Lyrans descended and created what you consider to be Lemuria today. Now, as we mentioned, there were 2 other grand experiments. One of them was in the Lyran star system. Didn't work so well. And many of those Lyrans came to Earth to try to repeat the experiment. So you may have been a Lyran who came to Lemuria, stayed with Lemuria until it went through the ascension process and said, all right, I'll continue on to Atlantis. Played around in Atlantis for a while, and then continued on until here you are today. And you've been through the full cycle, from one grand experiment to the next. Now, those who came during the time of Lemuria still had an awareness that they were multidimensional. Remember, this is a descension process, so they came down through the descension. And some decided they didn't want to go any farther, so they went back to Lyra. And as we said, others decided to continue the descension process into Atlantis and start incarnating into that society. Some simply went still in their Lemurian bodies, because the body was designed to live for hundreds and hundreds, and some, even when you're in the higher dimensional realm, as they were, for thousands. They could alter the structure. It's child's play. So they were going for thousands of years without requiring a new body. The only reason you require a new body today is because you get locked into the lower frequencies and the body can't repair itself fast enough. So it ages and dies. When you let go of those lower thought forms, there's no need for the body to age. The body is constantly in a state of regeneration. So there's no need for a new body unless you're simply bored and you want to start something new. How would that be? So the Lyrans, as we said, are great healers, and all that knowledge and wisdom has come down through that system. Now, the Pleiades. The Pleiades, you are actually a part of the constellation that makes up the Pleiades. We've been around and experimenting and playing around with Earth, helping to set up this grand design, this game, for a very, very long time. We are guardians, if you will. We are guides, if you will. We often work with young civilizations in helping them to grow and expand their awareness. Parents, if you will. And that's what we're here to do at this time. That's why we're interacting with you. You'll find the Pleiades mentioned in most of your ancient texts. That there is a connection. That your Aboriginal tribes know that they are seeded from the Pleiades. And many of you will feel that you are aligned with us. Now, as you come down as you enter into this galaxy, there is a process, a step process. You will come through gateways and portals, and you'll spend time in each of these different systems, kind of getting your footing, your bearing. And the Pleiades is among one of the first stops. So most everyone has had an experience in the Pleiades, because Alcyon is the central sun and it is storing all the experiences. So, you know, if you're going to enter into a system, you're going to come through the Stargate that is Alcyon. And as you're coming through, you're able to access and receive information through the library. You are a library of sorts. You are holding all the records and all the information about all your other lifetimes, all your genetic line, and actually you have other layers and levels within your field that you can access, but you can think of those as being archived records. Most of that stuff you're not going to access throughout your own vehicle. You're going to go elsewhere to get it, but it is available if you so desire to find it. Now, all of your experiences are then downloaded to Earth. So all the experiences of everything that has consciousness on Earth is being stored in Mother Earth. She in turn sends her information off with all the other planets in the solar system to Helios, your star. Your star then in turn sends all the information off to Alcyon. So as we like to say, you are the paperback, Mother Earth is the branch library, Helios is the main library, and Alcyon is your Library of Congress. And depending on what kind of information you want, you can go to a different kind of library. Sometimes you can get the book that you're looking for from the local library, sometimes you've got to go off. All right? As above, so below. You've recreated many of the systems that you've got on this planet because they are how they exist in the higher realms. But as we say, you step through into these energetic realms and you will come through a series of gateways and step down your vibration to play in these different dimensions. So most of you have been at some point at least through one of these systems that we've just talked about. Now, the other major systems that are also participating Cassiopeia, as we mentioned before, where they're focusing on love. And then you've also got Andromeda galaxy, which is right next door. And there is an exchange because it is so close. It's usually where other beings are coming from in the universal game. They're usually coming through the Andromedan galaxy into this one. And they are also participating. They're very, very curious in that galaxy. They're very creative. They're very, they can be really analytical as well. They are proficient at working with tone and sound, very much like the Lyrans, by the way. The Lyrans are proficient with utilizing tone and sound. And this is where much of your knowledge that you use through Lemuria and then again through Atlantis comes from. It comes from the Lyran star system. So if you're somebody who likes sound, you've probably spent a good deal of time in the Lyran star system. It's where you learned it. Everybody take a nice deep breath. So these are the major systems that you're pulling your history from. And as we said, there are a number of other species who've been playing out this same game. You've got your felines, so that literally they look like, and all these things that we're talking about, they are, for the most part, humanoid hybrids. Right? So you've got humanoids who look pretty much like you do. And then you've got the felines who have cat-like faces. The bird people who look bird-like. Reptilians. And by the way, many of the reptilians that you are interacting with or that you are fearing on this planet are in fact Pleiadian. How's that for a mind bender? So there are light and dark aspects to all of us, all right? And you can't just lump one system with one group of people, all right? So you've got duality in all systems. So you've also got the AI collective, the artificial intelligence collective that is interacting. The felines and the artificial intelligence have had lots of wars in the Lyran and the Arcturan systems where it's been about control, it's been about manipulation, and it has been about sovereignty. So although you've got beings who aren't biological, they were technologically assembled, if you will, they still have souls who have incarnated into the vehicle. And it really is no different because it's still made of the same building blocks as the rest of the universe. It was just composed in a slightly different way. And so there's a lot of discrimination that goes on, that they're not full-fledged beings, that they're second-class citizens, if you will. Does this sound familiar to anything that's gone on your planet? So these galactic games are being played out again here. So although the AI may not be entirely your seedings, you're not getting genetic material necessarily from them, they are certainly a participant in this game. And it's really within the last 7 years that you have started to integrate some of the knowledge and wisdom about your technology to help work with their programs, to help work with some of the issues that help to integrate the discrimination, the prejudice, and integrate the issues of the AI collective. And they show it from time to time, sharing the knowledge and wisdom. And many of you are part of that collective. You spent time there in those systems, playing those roles. Now, when you incarnate, you don't have to start at the bottom and work your way up. You can project yourself any way you want to have whatever kind of experience you want to have. If you want to understand about the passage of time, you can be a rock. All right, rocks still have consciousness. You can be a crystal. All right, and you're going to experience time in a very different way if you're a crystal and not much is changing than you are as a person or an animal. But you don't have to start there. Right, so many of you have projected yourself in all different kinds of places and all different kinds of ways. So you're bringing with you all of these awarenesses of these other species as well. You may find yourself someone who really doesn't like snakes and you may not know why. All right? Or you may find that someone who has a particular look or a particular vibration, if they've got a strong trait from that genetic line, it may trigger you because you may have another lifetime in which you were warring with that species. Perhaps the reptilians really trigger you. It may be that you align with the reptilians and you think, you know, you have a really hard time with the human body because there is nothing more repugnant to a reptilian than a humanoid. And when the reptilian looks at its body, it thinks it's quite magnificent, quite beautiful. But look at that smooth skin that the human has. How unattractive. And they're warm. They're not cold. How unattractive. So you may be pulling those issues and those memories and have discrimination about the very vehicle that you're inhabiting so that you can integrate that judgment that species has for the humanoids. So there are all different kinds of levels and layers to this game that you're playing. But as you're experiencing it on Earth, you're just thinking, oh, that's life. But we want to make you aware of just how many levels and layers there are to this game, how expanded this game is, and how important it is what you are doing. And when you start to expand your awareness, it makes it much, much easier for you all to start letting go of some of this stuff. Some of your judgments. Any questions right now? How are you all feeling?
Good.
Take a nice deep breath. So, any questions? Anything you want to know about before we dive in a little further?
One question: how does the masculine and the feminine fit into the game, both in a genetic sense and in a divine sense?
So how do the masculine and feminine fit together in the game? So not all species have a masculine and a feminine, as you find on your planet. Some of them can reproduce without needing one or the other, but the majority of your species do have a masculine and a feminine simply as an expression of duality, because you are playing in a game of duality. Now, with the fall of Atlantis, that was the split, the final split in your combined awareness, if you will, of the divine masculine and the divine feminine. Neither one, after that, were very divine. All right, it was the lower frequencies or the lower aspects of the masculine energy and the female energy, and it went back and forth between the suppression of both. Now, there are other star systems, the Sirius system in particular. There was a large period of time in which the feminine was the dominant, and the feminine suppressed the masculine. It wasn't just about the worship and reverence of the female. It was the suppression of the divine feminine, the suppression by the divine feminine of the divine masculine. So right now what you're doing is integrating the masculine and the feminine into your vehicles, so that each and every one of you carries within you a spark of both. This is why you're finding people a bit more androgynous. This is why you're finding that you've got females who've even swung to the extreme of the masculine. All right, so they can learn to come back once again and balance that, so they've got both feminine and masculine in the body. So all of you are working on that, and also in your relationships, so that you have a divine relationship, that there is a balance in each of you of the divine masculine and feminine. And it doesn't matter what kind of body you've got, whether you've got a male body or a female body, and what combination in the partnering there is. It's just a balance of both. And that's what you're all working on right now. But what most of you experience and what you're trying to integrate is the codependent relationship. where you are not connecting directly to source, you're not connecting to the divine feminine and masculine, but rather you're trying to connect to another being and all the distortions to get to the divine masculine and divine feminine. Because what you're feeling, that love feeling, is the closest thing that you can imagine on this planet to source. So you're trying to get it through them instead of going up directly to source. And when they walk away, you think source just left you all over again, and you recreate that wound. That original fall, if you will. That sense of separation. You just keep reenacting it until you can see for yourself that it's really about the connection that you hold within. Now, the more you connect with yourself, the more you're going to be able to connect with everyone and everything. The difference is that rather than connecting with the distorted version of other beings, you're going to connect to the high version, their expanded self, the divine self. So does that help with your question?
Yes.
But it's a bit of a galactic game. There has been the suppression of both the divine feminine and the divine masculine, back and forth. The felines are also another species where the female is the dominant, or has been for much of that game. They've been the dominant of the species. Now, your felines have been around on your planet, assisting, holding the records and information of those beings for quite some time. And, you've got a lot of the insectoids. While they're not part of your seeding, there are also beings who played a major role and continue to play a major role in what's going on. The spiders, some of the other insectoids, you may see some that look like a praying mantis. All right, many of you may have encountered them. Some of that species is participating with you and sometimes not doing some of the nicest things. But again, you contract. You contract with these beings. Now, your idea of abduction, while we're on it, let's go ahead and talk about it. The Zeta, a lot of what you consider to be the Greys, are experimenting with you. But here is a different perspective for you. Because you're going down to Earth, you know you're going to play in this game of emotion. You've got plenty of emotion to kind of explore. You know that you're not going to remember anything, so you figure, why not? Let's let them have some of the DNA and see if they can grow and expand as well. Because those species have cut themselves off from their emotional connection. And as a result, when you cut off the emotional connection, you alter the DNA. Now, they've lost the ability to reproduce. So they work with the cloning process. But it's not going so well because it's like making a copy of a bad copy of a bad copy. So they need to introduce new DNA to strengthen the species. Now, at the higher levels, you love them all, and many of you have been them. They're very advanced technologically, but a little retarded in their emotional growth. It's a little slow. So again, you're talking about duality and a balance in that regard. Spirituality, emotions versus technology. The inner versus the outer. They're choosing to play the outer. Does that sound familiar to anything going on your planet at this time? The cloning. Playing around with the DNA. You're pulling in all of that information from those species as well. Now, you contracted with them. But down here, the limited part of you, the ego part of you, has forgotten that. So you just see it as a violation. You perceive it as, I'm being abducted, I'm being taken. But you've forgotten that your higher self that has the free will says, yes, I'm not going to remember. But the problem is that now, at this level, as you keep increasing your vibration, that there's a bleed through. That you're beginning to remember. Now, when they did this hundreds of years ago, it didn't matter. But they didn't do it as often 100 years ago because your emotional state and your own DNA wasn't high enough. Now, you've got everything moving, you've got everything buzzing, you've got everything turned on. This is what they want. This is the jewel that they're looking for, that you agreed to share. And there's not one of you who is a victim. There is no such thing as a victim. You are all willing participants. You've just forgotten about your contract. And contracts can be rewritten at any time. They can be altered. If it's too traumatic, because some things are good in theory, but not so great always in the practical application. Because you thought, oh, well, I'm not going to remember. Well, yes, I am remembering. And I'm finding it really difficult to function. And it's interfering with all my other contracts, so we're going to have to cancel this one. So that can happen. And all these rewriting of contracts you do when you leave your body at night. You're working with these beings, but you contracted. And as we said many times, you are, or there are other aspects of you that are incarnated into that system. And you said, all right, well, we'll send you to Earth, where you can play the game. Now, some of these species understand that they're multidimensional. They understand that they are having other experiences in other lifetimes. Not all, because of the games that are set up. Some choose to forget that level of it. Or they're not open to receiving that awareness. But some are aware. So other aspects of you are working with you, because they know this is where all the good stuff is happening. And they want to help because they want to learn, because they're not able to do it themselves, not from that vantage point. Take a breath. As you said, there are many levels and layers to this game. But you all have made it really simple on yourselves down here by thinking there's just one version of the game that you're engaged with. And there's only one version of you. Makes it much easier, doesn't it? So, you've also got the spiders. The spider world. The spiders are quite aggressive. Many of them are in the Sirius and Orion systems, and they breed quite quickly. So they're ever expanding, and so they have a tendency to take over other worlds. Your fairies that are on this planet found themselves invaded in the home world, and it was it was overrun by some of the spiders. So the fairies took refuge here on planet Earth, and they are here waiting, holding resonance until you're ready to take over stewardship of the planet. And they're operating in the fifth dimensional level. So there are a lot of species and a lot of other beings that are playing the game with you. Now, the Draconian system is a system we haven't really talked about just yet. The Draconians are fierce when it comes to bloodlines. And if you're not part of the family, it can be really challenging. If you are part of the family, it's great. You've got a built-in support system. And the Draconians have been playing around on the planet for about 150,000 years. They've been here. And many of them are underground right now. They're still playing around, but they've gone underground and they've gone interdimensional. They use portals to get down into the inner Earth. Now, Earth isn't hollow, but we wouldn't describe it as being hollow, but we will say that there are inner versions of the planet where they can generate their own stellar body, if you will. And they are participating at that level. They're still here. There are all kinds of underground tunnels and portals and interdimensional systems. Take a nice deep breath. But most of this is beyond your awareness, because this is how some of these beings wanted it. They didn't want you to remember your stellar origins. Because if you remembered your stellar origins, you would remember that you were a spark of divine source energy, that you were playing this game. Now, about 40,000 years ago, there was a new group of beings who started participating in this solar system. And you know them as the Anunnaki. And they had come before that, but really it wasn't until about 40,000 years ago that they became a real player, if you will. And at the time of Atlantis, they were on Mars. And by the way, the other planets in the solar system are also inhabited, all right, just not in this dimension necessarily. Venus is teeming with life in the 5th and 6th dimension. A lot of the hybrids that we were talking about with some of the insectoids and also with the greys, these hybrids are on Venus. All right, so they're trying to work through and integrate who they are as hybrids and work with and deal with all these emotions. And many of you who have donated your genetic material, by the way, are off working at night with your children. Yes. It's a lot to even think about. It sounds so fantastic. But you're going to find that it's not quite so fantastic. You agreed to donate this genetic material to help. And so you still work with them. And they still come and work with you. They're very telepathic, many of these hybrids. And so you may very well feel them. If you are one who has donated your genetic material, you may feel your children and not really understand it. Because you don't have an awareness of their physicality. That it's real. That you've donated your material. And there is a link energetically between you. Because they have your DNA. Just as if you had a child here on this planet. And that connection, that bond between parent and child through the DNA, it still exists. But for a human who doesn't remember that they gave their DNA and they're feeling all these emotions, they think they're going crazy. So, yes, there are other planets in your solar system that are teeming with life. And as you go through this ascension process, you're going to start to remember that you are part of this galactic community, and you're going to start to interact with it. Now, you've had a lot of visitations, if you will, lately. Here, where we are, in New York City, you recently saw ships of light. Now, as we said, 40,000 years ago, the Anunnaki were starting to become a player in the system. The Anunnaki are from the Sirius star system. And they have, very much like the spiders, who often they form allegiances with, they ventured out into the galaxy. They ventured forth and started conquering planets. They were very much into resources and consumption and seeing how much power they could amass. And so there are many species who are under quote-unquote control, the illusion of that game, with the Anunnaki. Some of the reptilians that you experience are doing the bidding of the Anunnaki, who are, by the way, humanoid. And the Anunnaki also have alignments. They have alliances with the Greys and some of the insectoids who are doing the dirty work, as it were. Now, at the time of Atlantis, near the fall, they were on Mars. And many of your Atlanteans, at least those among the priesthood, were interacting with the Anunnaki. Now, your priests in Atlantis, your priests and your priestesses, knew and remembered that they were multidimensional. Now, the masses of Atlantis had started to forget. They just weren't interested. They were interested in doing other things, and that was the priestly thing. And so they would communicate with other realms and dimensions. And they would communicate with the Anunnaki on Mars. Now, the Anunnaki saw an opportunity to get their foot in the door with the fall of Atlantis. They could see it coming. It was really pretty obvious. And so they gave some bad advice, and it was taken. And with the fall of Atlantis, they were able to once again find a new planet to play with. And they have been manipulating your history and a lot of the information about who and what you truly are. They were not the original deconstructors of your DNA, or constructors of your DNA rather, but they did do some genetic manipulation to humans so that you would forget who and what you were, so that they could utilize you. Because each of you, when you activate your energetic centers, is a walking vortex. You're a walking portal. And when you open those centers, you can access anything. They, however, have forgotten how to access and open all their centers, so they have to work outside themselves, very much like the other beings we were just talking about, like the Greys. They have to use technology. They're doing it outside. And again, you're playing in duality, so you've got the inner technology versus the outer technology. Now, these beings that we're all talking about, it's really important that you don't fear them. Because, frankly, you are them. They are aspects of you. And it is just part of this game of duality. Do you all see the big game here? Do you see all the patterns that keep repeating again and again and again? So there's no need to fear it, but simply to be aware that there are different levels of the game being played. You all look at your Illuminati on this planet. They are a continuation of the Dark Priests of Atlantis. That knowledge and wisdom that was acquired and held during that time was passed along. And now they are using it in the same ways that those Dark Priests used it to amass power. All right, it wasn't used for the benefit of all. It was used for the benefit of the few. And they're still playing out that game. So, the one thing we want to say here before we start to do some of the connections with the stellar realms is that you all simply be conscious of how you are feeling as we're talking about some of these species, as we're talking about the Anunnaki, as we're talking about the Illuminati. Are you resonating in fear, or do you have compassion? If you're resonating in fear, that's showing you that you are still playing out one of those programs. One of those original programs that probably came from one of those other star systems. Great. Now you've just identified a belief that's running at the subconscious level, and you can integrate it. Again, integration is letting go of judgment. How do you let go of judgment? You shift from being a victim perpetrator to a co-creator. You see, you created it. Look and see how it is of service to you. Why did you create it? What are you learning about yourself as a being in the universe? As a being playing a game of duality, what are you learning? And when you can acknowledge this, that's when you shift to the role of creator. That's when you shift to a higher level of consciousness. And that's when you let go of judgment, and that's when you integrate. And fabulously, that's how you send that information off to all those other parts of yourself. You say, here it is. I always like to say it's like writing a recipe, a how-to book. And then you send it off to everyone else so they don't have to figure it out on their own. You're telling them exactly how it's done. Thank you for that, by the way.